So next up, we've got Markus Wilding from Playsense, who's going to be talking about cutting through the noise, how to get your game noticed in a challenging market.
Welcome, everybody. Let me start with a simple question, hypothetical question, or rhetorical question, if you will. Why are you here? Maybe you're here because the title of my talk caught your eye. Maybe you're here because the topic hits close to home. Because let's face it, we're all navigating a very challenging, noisy marketplace right now. And the question on how to make our games stand out is what keeps many of us awake at night. I know it does to me. And I've been in marketing and communications for about 30 years now, which means I've seen trends come and go, and I've got my fair share of ideas about what works and what doesn't. But while preparing this presentation, I kept asking myself the same question. Will this be worth their time? Will any of my ideas feel fresh? Will my talk actually change the way you do your work? Now here's the truth. Some of what I say today will sound familiar, and that's okay. Sometimes we need to hear our own thoughts echoed back to us to turn them into action. Sometimes what feels common sense is only obvious in hindsight, or to people who already are practicing it. So here's my challenge to you. If something I say today feels obvious or familiar to you, don't just nod along. Ask yourself instead, am I actually doing this? Am I following through? Because at the end of the day, ideas only matter if they actually translate into action. My name is Markus Wilding. I've been in the games industry since 1995. Spent the first half of my career working for AAA publishers, Activision, Rockstar Games, 2K, before moving into the indie market space, spending a couple of years at production house Remote Control Productions, and then the last 7 years I built and led the international marketing team for Private Division. And now I'm an independent consultant for developers, publishers, and agencies. And one of my clients is the creative agency Playsense, who I'm representing today. There's a reason for that, but we'll get to that in a little bit. Now, we've all seen these brutal stats. Last year alone, almost 19,000 games were released on Steam, more than 90,000 on iOS, 160,000 on Android. The question isn't just, is your game any good anymore, but will anyone notice? Will anyone care? Will anyone see it? So today I'd like to talk about how to cut through the noise with quality, creativity, strategic content, and smart partnerships, even on a tight budget. We've all seen it. There's a noticeable shift in the marketing landscape. The old formulas, big asset drops, big ad spends, predictable trailers, no longer guarantee success, especially during a time when budgets are limited and teams are facing resource constraints. And there's always that looming risk of your game becoming lost in the crowd. Now the good news is that more often than not, it's not about spending more, it's about spending smarter and being more creative. Today I'm going to talk about these three topics that I feel can help overcome these nasty odds. We all work in marketing, and let's be honest, while we try to be creative, especially when it comes to game trailers, it can feel like we're all just hitting the same predictable beats. Big music, flashy cuts, dramatic taglines. It works, mostly, but does it really stick? Here's the good news. Sometimes you don't need to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to create something truly memorable. You just need a little creativity. For example, let's talk about a game as dark as gothic as Resident Evil using a puppet show to cut through the noise and grab everyone's attention. In the lead up to the game's release, Capcom dropped a series of low-budget, puppet-themed videos featuring enemies like Lady Dimitrescu or Heisenberg, not as towering, ominous figures and enemies, but as adorable, slightly creepy, or massively creepy puppets, engaging in goofy antics. It was unexpected, it was bizarre, and it was pure marketing genius. First, so why did it work? So first, emotional resonance and shareability. Fans loved the playful contrast between the terrifying tone of the game and the absurd silliness of these puppets. It was weird enough to spark curiosity and funny enough to get shared a ton on platforms like Twitter, it was still called Twitter back then, and YouTube. For a while, the show was simply everywhere. Secondly, creativity on a modest budget. This wasn't some flashy, hugely expensive trailer. This was a quirky, low-budget production that stuck with people because of the idea, not because of the production value. And finally, tapping into fandom. By leaning into the characters fans already loved, like Lady Dimitrescu, the campaign gave players a new and unexpected way to engage with the brand and created a sense of community. The result was massive buzz for Resident Evil The Village. Fans were hyped, media outlets picked it up, and Capcom got a ton of free coverage. If you can find ways to surprise, delight, and connect with your audience emotionally, you'll create something far more memorable than any generic ad. So don't be afraid to be bold or even a little bit creepy. Now let's talk about channels. There's no shortage of channels these days, and the knee-jerk reaction is to try to be on all of them. Okay, maybe not on Spotify unless you have a kick-ass podcast, but while it's smart to claim your handle everywhere, even only to prevent people from nabbing it, not every channel is the right fit for your game. I know, Captain Obvious, but you'd be amazed about how many developers and publishers still crank out the same asset across every single platform without stopping to think about where their real focus should be. It's not about being everywhere. It's about being in the right place. Now here's a game that I worked on. It's truly special. It's Kerbal Space Program. KSP started as a passion project by Squad, which was a small indie developer based in Mexico City. And over time it became nothing short of a phenomenon. So how did a little indie game about rocket science of all things take off and build a loyal fan base? By focusing on where it mattered. From early on in development, and even more so during early access, the team zeroed in on Reddit. Why? Because the game's scientific, physics-based gameplay and sandbox nature fit perfectly with Reddit's culture of discussion and curiosity. Instead of shouting into the void on platforms that might not resonate, the developers built a presence where their audience already was. Platforms like Reddit and, of course, increasingly Discord allow for something game communities love: authentic, unfiltered discussions and interactions between developers and players. The KSP team embraced this with countless AMAs on Reddit, fostering transparency and authenticity. And fans crave authenticity. When your game has a unique theme or story to it, and you want to tell, they want to feel part of the journey. Squad didn't just build a game. They built a conversation around it, one that many players, that made players feel valued and connected and part of the journey. So know your audience and meet them where they are. Be transparent, be authentic, and foster a real sense of community. When you do, you're not just promoting your game, you're building a loyal fan base that will champion your game for years to come. Now, another example is Cult of the Lamb. It's a game about running a cult, but the developers turned to TikTok to spark their own following. Instead of taking the heavy-handed route, they played with the game's darkly humorous theme, creating a quirky, fun, and hilariously weird video. Well, a ton of videos. The result was millions of views and a fan base that couldn't wait to convert. So why did this work so well? The art style, first of all, was made for TikTok. TikTok thrives, of course, on eye-catching, snackable content, and the game's charmingly creepy art style was a perfect match. Every frame looked like it was made to go viral, whether it was the adorable cult leader or the sinister sacrificial rituals. Number two is the tone of voice. It was absolutely on point. The quirky, weird humor in the videos wasn't just funny, it was perfectly aligned with the game's personality. From dark jokes to absurd scenarios, the content made viewers think, this is exactly the kind of weirdness I want in my life. And so what really helped was that the developer and the publisher, Devolver in this case, understood TikTok's culture. TikTok isn't a place for lectures or sales pitches. It's where people scroll for a quick laugh. The developer leaned into that with short, funny videos that entertained first and promoted second. A great example was the videos they posted featuring a cult initiation of dances and over-the-top rituals. Clips like these racked up millions of views, and the game turned the game into a viral sensation before it even launched. I mean, look at those numbers. This is not just an outlier. I mean, yes, there's the one that does 4 million, but almost every video that they released was in the millions. To stand out, you have to understand the platform you're working on. TikTok isn't about being polished, isn't about being perfect. It's about being fun, relatable, and most importantly, shareable. When your content fits both your game's personality and the platform's culture, you're not just promoting, you're creating a loyal fan base that will spread the word for you. That just doesn't happen when you are heavy-handed, when you have heavy-handed sales or informative videos. Nobody goes to TikTok for that. And finally, finding the right partner. And this is one of those things that's true as much in business as it is in life. Choose wisely. The right partner can make all the difference. Sure, there are plenty of options out there, but on paper, a lot of them might look similar. They'll check the same boxes, offer the same services, and provide the same skill sets. But here's the thing, a great partner doesn't just fulfill your needs, they align with your values, your way of thinking, and the way you work. Why does that matter? Because when you and your partner are truly on the same page, it's not just easier to collaborate, it's transformative. You're not constantly explaining yourself or trying to pull them along in your direction. Instead, they're right there with you, anticipating your needs, challenging you in the right ways, and amplifying your strengths. So my advice is, don't just pick the first option or the one that looks good on paper. Find a partner who gets your vision, shares your passion, and is ready to go the extra mile with you. In the end, that connection will deliver more value than any checklist of services ever could. And this is why events like Pocket Gamer Connects here is so great, because you don't just go on a website and view services. You meet people in person, you can understand if they're on the same page with you, if they share your values. It's incredibly helpful. A great example of this is actually working with influencers and content creators. We all know that successful partnerships in this space can make or break your game. And yet, time and time again, I see teams approach influencer marketing with a shotgun strategy, either blasting out invites to everyone and everyone, or simply go for the biggest creators in this space with the biggest reach. Now, those big names look tempting, but obviously they're also the most expensive and in highest demand. So even if you've got the budget to work with them, if you do, then fantastic for you. But there's no guarantee that they even have the time or interest to work with you, because everybody else is showering them with money anyway. So especially when you don't have an influencer agency and have to handle outreach yourself, it's really important to doing your homework early and thoroughly. When we worked on Kerbal Space Program 2, we partnered closely with content creators who specialized in rocket science and spaceflight. That meant we were getting high-quality content that deeply resonated with an audience that was already invested in the subject matter. Sure, some of the creators actually, like Scott Manley, built their channels on Kerbal Space Program, but we also worked with folks like Everyday Astronaut, which is a channel who barely covers video games, or smaller influencers like Reed Captain, who focuses on a handful of scientifically grounded titles. Now, Reed Captain's subscriber count was under 300,000 when we worked with him, which is not exactly fantastic by YouTube standards. But some of his videos reached 500,000 viewers, one of them more than 1 million. And that's because it was a target partnership that really worked out. When you work with the right creators, their audience isn't just big, it's the right audience. Because as we all know, videos go viral when people engage with them. And videos by these creators regularly sparked hundreds of comments and discussions. And so when it comes to influencers, I'd highly recommend not chasing the biggest numbers and instead focusing on finding creators whose content aligns with your game's strength and who can connect with your audience. And that brings us to Playsense. Yes, I know this is a sponsored talk, but don't worry, this isn't going to be one of those hard sells for some shiny new product that promises to solve all of your problems. But that said, I genuinely believe that at Playsense we've come up with a model that addresses a pressing issue that many companies in our industry face, and those, especially those who don't have massive budgets to throw around. So if you're facing challenges and are wondering if there's a smarter way to approach them, Playsense might be worth a closer look. Thank you. If you're not familiar with Playsense, we're a creative and production studio, but what makes us different is where we come from. And Playsense was born out of publishing. Back in May 2022, 7 key directors from Wargaming's internal creative team executed a friendly buyout of the business unit and launched Playsense as an independent agency. And here's why that matters. As former publishers, The Playsense team doesn't just understand marketing, they understand you. They were in your shoes. They know how publishers and developers, what they need, because they've dealt with the same challenges. They've worked with the same constraints and navigated similar internal processes. This isn't just a creative agency, it's a partner who speaks your language and gets what makes your business tick. Now, Playsense offer a comprehensive list of services in the fields of brand and strategy, creative and production, and promotion and support. But today, I want to focus on creative and production, specifically trailers, which is where the new model comes into play. Now, this is one of the titles that we originally had in mind for this talk. Let me explain. We all know high-quality trailers are a crucial way to grab people's attention, but often, well, always, professionally done trailers are prohibitively expensive. Here's our idea. We're piloting a new model where instead of full upfront payments, we share the risk and reward with our clients. The idea is that indies and smaller publishers can have high-impact, high-production value trailers without crippling their budgets. This is about enabling everyone to compete on a bigger stage than before in the crucial fight for eyeballs. So here's how it works. Developers or publishers only pay a certain percentage of the production cost upfront. The actual percentage will be defined on a sliding scale, but the idea is that you pay half or less than the actual cost. And then the remaining cost is recouped by Playsense after the game ships through a rev share model. So as an example, let's say the cost of a trailer is 50K. Instead of paying the full amount ahead, you pay 40%, 20K. And once the game is released, the revenue share kicks in, and we recoup the remaining 30K. We use a sliding scale on a case-by-case basis, but the percentage is likely going to be in the 8 to 10% range. Needless to say, the revenue share is capped once the money is recouped. So not only is this a way to defer some of the cost for a trailer to when the revenue comes in, it also strengthens the client-agency relation as Playsense almost becomes an investor into the success of your game. So to recap, marketing success isn't about spending the most money. It's about being the smartest and most innovative in the room. By being creative, by picking the right channels, and by choosing the right partners, which in our case and as a bonus can help you being creative. We believe that the old ways of creating trailers, huge upfront costs, inaccessible to most indies and smaller publishers, it doesn't have to be the only way. By rethinking how we collaborate and share the risk, we can make high-impact marketing content accessible to almost everyone. Thank you very much for your attention. Any questions?
Thank you. Yeah, we got time for a couple of questions if anyone wants to ask anything.
Hi, do you have any tips when it comes to approaching any publishers as an indie game studio?
Not exactly the topic of this talk, but
I thought, because you were talking about
but it's the right partner, right?
And publishers.
You're right. I mean, obviously, it very much depends on your game. This is, again, going back to finding the right partner. One thing I learned, because I sat on the other side of the table, having worked for publishers for a long time, is you'd be surprised how many developers don't do their homework and don't understand who they're talking to. I know that everybody's talking to many, many publishers, but please do your homework and know what their main games are, where their focuses lie, sometimes you can even find out what they look for in a developer and have the answers ready. That's always good advice, because as a publisher, you're being inundated with developer pitches, and you want to hear that the developer you're talking to knows who you are and what you want.